Robert Johnson was the son of President Andrew Johnson. He was a lawyer, a politician, cavalry officer in the Union Army during the American Civil War, and later secretary for his father during his term in the Oval Office. He also inherited his father's drinking problem, which was even more out of control than his pop's. He practiced as a lawyer in the state of Tennessee in 1856, and a few years later was a one-term state legislator from 1859 to 1861 in the state of Tennessee. Like his father, Robert was a Southern Unionist who urged his fellow Tennesseans to remain loyal to the Constitution and the Union. He joined the Union Army in 1862 and signed on for a 3-year stint in the 4th Tennessee Volunteer Regiment as their commander and was given the rank of colonel. The unit would later be reorganized as the 1st Tennessee Cavalry Regiment. His father, Andrew Johnson, was the military governor of Tennessee and would often ask Robert's superiors to keep an eye on the youngster and to make sure he did his part as a soldier. He was described by his fellow soldiers as a big little man due to being 5'6". During this time, his drinking was slowly becoming an issue. Like his father and brothers, the Johnsons loved their spirits, and when his older brother Charles Johnson, an assistant surgeon in the 10th Tennessee Infantry, was killed in an accident when he fell off his horse, that by some accounts was caused by going on a drunken bender, and it spiraled out of control. Johnson's alcohol abuse got so bad that his commanding officer, Brigadier General William S. Rosecrans, wrote his father, Governor Johnson, that Robert has been drinking so as to become a subject of remarks everywhere. He ordered Robert to quit drinking excessively and had him on a different assignment after the death of his brother Charles. He was to go out and raise a volunteer brigade, which he failed to do so. The general then put him on an administrative assignment in Nashville. Tired of his son's public drinking embarrassments and unable to do the simplest task ordered by his commanders, Governor Johnson wrote to his son on November 1863 that he resigned his command by writing, "You tender your resignation, predicted upon my wish for you to do so, and, as I obtain the commission, require you to resign, and therefore you do resign. I have not indicated to you, by word or deed, any desire or wish on my part that you should resign your commission as colonel of the regiment, but on the contrary, have expressed myself in the most empathetic terms that I would rather see you once more yourself again and at the head of your regiment, going to your own native home, than be possessed by the highest honors which could be conferred upon me. In this, so far, I have doomed to deep disappointment." Robert resigned from the army a few months later, in February of 1864. The official reason given was for reasons purely of a private nature. At the end of the Civil War, he was given the higher rank of Brigadier General post-service. On April 14, 1865, a few weeks after his post-service promotion to general, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The next day, his father Andrew Johnson was sworn in as President of the United States, but according to Robert's older sister Martha, he was in his usual condition and apparently so out of it that he was unaware of the awful calamity which had occurred to the nation. Robert's mother, Eliza, the new First Lady, wrote to her son Robert asking him to come to Washington, D.C. and become the personal secretary for his father in the Oval Office. He arrived on August 5, 1865, and officially became the president's new secretary. The original one, William Browning, was appointed Secretary of Legation to Mexico, but in a side note, he never took the position because he became ill with the inflammation of the bowels, which would eventually kill him a few months later. Rumor has it that he, like Robert, was a hardcore drunk, and excessive drinking killed him. Robert began his duties as secretary to the president on November 14, 1865. His mother thought that being surrounded by family would help him with his alcohol abuse. The fact he was surrounded by booze 24/7 only made matters worse. Those that wanted favors from the president would just drown him in wine and spirits. And women. Robert kept a diary during his time as secretary and documented his many drunken escapades. His drinking led to him not appearing at the New Year's Day White House reception on January 1st, 1866. He wrote that in his diary that he spent December 31st, 1865 with some old friends and drank to the old year. Senator from Kansas, Samuel C. Pomeroy, claimed that he saw the president and his son, along with his son-in-law, David Patterson, getting blitzed in the White House. But he would later change that story and said he only saw Robert was the one that was visibly drunk. And a former ambassador wrote to the chairman of the Senate Judicial Committee, Lyman Trumbull, that there is too much whiskey in the White House, and harlots go into the private secretary's office unannounced in broad daylight. Robert was being swayed by those who wanted favors and kickbacks from the president. Robert tried to quit drinking during his time in the Oval Office. He even wrote in his diary on September 1st, 1866, having fully and determinedly made up my mind to abstain in the future from all intoxicating liquors, and putting my trust in God, I hope to finish the remainder of my life a sober and respected member of society. He continued to try and live a sober life while being the president's secretary, but from June through October of 1867, Robert was gone from the White House. He wrote in his diary on July 14th that he was buying a large quantity of gin, and the next day he checked into the government hospital for the insane and would initially stay there until October to dry out. During his first day, Robert would host various young ladies. He stayed at the hospital until October 15th. His father visited him only once during his hospitalization, and that was a few days before he was released. He remained sober for a couple of weeks before he was readmitted to the government hospital for the insane on October 28th after heavily drinking the night before. He was released on orders of the president on November 2nd and returned to his duties as secretary. The Waukegan Weekly Gazette reported later that day that the telegraph brings an expected world the highly important intelligence that Colonel Robert Johnson, son of the president, has resumed his duties at the White House. Master Bob's duties may be said to be arduous and exhausting and impossible. He helps his respected sire to sort pardons and taste bourbons. Robert was sober for 3 days until he returned to the hospital on November 5th and remained there until November 24th. After he checked out, Robert went to New York City and spent his time there on a drunken bender before returning back to the White House, where he nursed a week-long hangover. During this time, most of his work was being done by his replacement, Edmund Cooper, while Robert was just a figurehead. He continued to struggle with his battle against the bottle. In his diary, he wrote on December 13, 1867, "May God bring me now out of my troubles and trials, and see me enter life with a renewed hope and vigor." He swore to sobriety for a full year, but on January 24th, 1868, he was reportedly back in the lunatic asylum of the District of Columbia for a period of drunkenness. A month later, his father was up for impeachment in his role for removing the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton. Some newspapers believe that the drunkenness of Robert Johnson played a role in the impeachment trial. The Manchester Journal reported on February 28, 1868, "It was considered worth telegraphing from Washington the other day that Colonel Robert Johnson, the son and private secretary of President Johnson, had announced that we, that is the president and his private secretary, were not going to recognize Mr. Stanton as Secretary of War in any manner whatsoever. We now perceive that Colonel Robert Johnson, son and private secretary to the president, has been placed in a lunatic asylum of Washington, D.C. to cure him, if possible, of periodic drunkenness, which is, in his case, amounts to insanity. It might be well for the country if the same treatment could be tried in the case of the remainder of we." Robert was released in August of 1868 after being declared fully recovered from his temporary insanity. He officially resigned from his figurehead position as secretary to the president and retired, reportedly, to practice law. In reality, Robert Johnson was a sick and broken man. He spent time in the New York State inebriated asylum and missed the inauguration of Ulysses S. Grant. He was released and left Washington on March 18, 1869, and left for Greenville, Tennessee. During his stays in asylums, Johnson developed an opiate problem along with his drinking. He began mixing the two together, and on April 22nd, 1869, Robert Johnson died from complications of alcohol and opiate poisoning. The night before his death, he took a bottle of laudanum and drank it along with his booze. Some believe that Robert may have committed suicide. Other newspapers reporting on his death threw shade at the dead man. The Chicago Evening Post reported his death by saying, Colonel Robert Johnson, son of ex-president Johnson, died yesterday at Greenville, Tennessee. He was a young man of intemperate habits and came by them honestly. The Jackson Standard said, Colonel Robert Johnson, son of Andy Johnson, is dead. He drank himself crazy years ago when he was with General George W. Morgan's army between Portland and Gallipolis. The military authorities forbade every doggery keeper on the road, letting him have any liquor on the account of his violent character when he was drunk. The San Francisco Examiner, in an article about the brother of Andrew Johnson Jr.'s death, said about him, Robert Johnson was found dead in his bed one morning, having retired as well as usual the evening before. Robert Johnson will be remembered as a man who benefited from nepotism, fell upwards in life, but he couldn't defeat the alcoholic gene that plagued him and his family.